So I'm joined today by Brian Schrauger of JerusalemJournal.net. And Brian also publishes a daily news update of headlines and relevant news, particularly focused on the Middle East and Israel. He also has written for the Jerusalem Post and blogs regularly on various topics related to Israel and the Middle East and how that fits into Bible prophecy. And you can see his daily report at, it's called the Haim Report, CHAIM, the Haim Report, and you can get that 6 days a week. It's updated. It's actually updated 24/6. Is that right, Brian?
That's correct.
Okay. And you recently wrote an article, and I'm going to go off script here just a little bit. You wrote an article a few weeks ago that was in the Jerusalem Post about, well, tell it was about it. It mentioned it was about China and the New World Order, I believe. I don't remember the title of the article.
The title that went with it was Israel and the Unexpected New World Order. And that New World Order is coming from the East, not the West. What's happening is we're seeing China pursuing, in just the last 5 or 6 years, this massive economic program in what they call the One Belt, One Road initiative. Am I still on with you? Oh,
yeah,
okay.
you are.
I thought I lost you. Kind of lost
Go
my
ahead and
train.
say.
You want to start again?
Yeah, go ahead and start what your article is about. I'll edit it out.
Okay, so the article is called Israel and the Unexpected Third New World Order. And that unexpected New World Order is interesting because it's from the East, not the West. It's China and this massive economic initiative it's undertaking called One Belt, One Road. It wants to resurrect what was once called the Silk Road, the economic road for trading things from the East all the way to the West. So the land part of this belt goes right through Tehran. It goes into Syria, and from Syria it goes two ways. It goes one way to the Mediterranean Sea, a coastal port there, and the other way it goes is up through Turkey into Western Europe. The potential there is just immense for prosperity, and Israel is ideally positioned to participate in this. But it raises all kinds of interesting scenarios in terms of conflict, Iran being a partner in this initiative with both Russia and China. It explains why Iran is willing to partner with these so-called infidel states that are completely non-religious, because there's a lot of money at stake. And also, Iran is piggybacking on this, hoping to achieve its big ambition, which is a renewed Persian Empire that stretches across the Fertile Crescent all the way. They would like to see it go all the way to the Mediterranean, which means Syria. So their involvement in Syria is for these reasons. So this is the new unexpected world order. Russia and China in all of this, I don't think they want war. I think they want money. It's all about money, prosperity. Israel can participate in this, but in the middle of it all, in the mix, is Iran. And Iran, of course, is Israel's sworn enemy. And it's going to present a problem for Israel.
I get the impression sometimes that Russia is, in some respects, sort of a reluctant partner with Iran in a lot of these things, in that Russia wants to extend its influence because it needs the economic things that it can get out of being involved in the Middle East. It wants to control its market to supply Europe with gas. That's essentially its main source of income. But they also have a Sunni problem in Moscow and Russia. Yeah. And so they have this alliance with Shia Iran, Persia, to kind of hold the Sunnis at bay. But I think that I suspect that, Putin is a very intelligent man, and I suspect that he's trying to play all of these people off against each other and sort of try to control Iran, that he doesn't really trust all that much, by being involved in Syria, putting a base there, getting the warm water port at Tartus, and the air bases near Latakia, or the air. I guess they have two air bases. So there's all this conjunction of these various world powers that are trying to do this. And I agree with you that the economic upside of this is tremendous. It's very expensive to put together, but it has a tremendous upside. And I think it's also done to break up any American influence that might be visited upon the Middle East. And also, I think, to eventually get rid of the American dollar being the world reserve currency.
Precisely.
And because it was the collapse of the British pound as the reserve currency in the world that led to the decline of the British Empire. And so I think they see this as an opportunity to bring down what they perceive to be the American empire.
Yes.
So, and I think you mentioned in the article, or I read somewhere, where the economic cost of this is somewhere in the $7-8 trillion range to put this together.
The one estimate I read, I think it was like $7.5 trillion. And so they are looking for money to do this thing, but they're making good progress. It looks like it's going to happen. The estimated cost, as I recall, is about $7.5 trillion to develop this one belt, one road economic pathway. One is by land and the other is by sea. It's a lot of money, and yet it looks like this is going to happen.
Mm-hmm. So, any other things that you mentioned in that article in the Jerusalem Post? I'll have to dig it out.
I think what's really interesting, the most interesting thing about this, is that it provides us with a framework, a possible framework, I think more than anything else so far, about how end-time events are likely to shape up. It explains why Russia is going to descend from the north, as it in fact has already begun to do, but will do again. It has a huge economic interest. It's going to stay in Syria. It's not about to leave. Why is it in Syria? Why did it come down? Well, gas, but also because it wants to be in the middle of this economic highway from China. Why is China participating in military drills with Iran, even sending their personnel into Syria? Why are they doing naval drills with both Iran and Russia? Why is Iran, an Islamic state, partnering with non-religious states? It's all about this economic thing. This is what brings it all together. It explains why, it gives a possible framework for why a peace treaty might be negotiated with Israel, yes? Because Russia and China certainly don't want war. They want, because war is not going to help them with to make money from this economic highway, this belt going through the Fertile Crescent. I think this is the framework to watch for end time events as they unfold.
Well, we know that there are, when we talk about the Ezekiel 38 war, at least the majority view is that, you know, Russia is involved in that, and Russia is a reluctant participant in that. There are hooks put in the jaws to bring this northern power down into this conflict. A lot of people just look at one particular aspect of that. It does say they come to take a spoil, and there's a lot of speculation as to what that might be. It might be oil or gas in the Golan Heights. It might be the gas fields that are off the coast of Israel coast in the Mediterranean.
Oh yeah.
So,
yeah.
But this just adds one more economic aspect. The Silk Road adds one more economic aspect as to why they might be brought down in.
Yes.
So I would highly recommend that everybody go and read Brian's article from a few weeks ago now, I think, in the Jerusalem Post. It was well done, and I think it's a very important article. Now, let's talk, while we're on that subject of the northern part of Israel, tell us from your perspective what's going on. I saw an article this week on Front Page Magazine called the the Third Lebanon War. There were two prior Lebanon wars, the last one being in 2006. And as a precursor to this, I've played the clip of the Israeli Air Force head speaking at the Herzliya conference, or Herzliya conference a few weeks ago, security conference. And his talk there was essentially what took us weeks to do in southern Lebanon in 2006, we will be able to accomplish in 48 to 60 hours now. And the implication was you're going to be stunned at what we're able to do. So we know that there's this situation with Hezbollah on the northern border. We also know that there was this recent finding that came out from published in one of the science journals in National Geographic and elsewhere, that Canaanite bones that were found in Israel in archaeological excavations were analyzed for DNA, and then it was compared to people across modern Lebanon, and they found that there is a genetic connection between the Canaanites and the people in southern Lebanon, which is kind of interesting because I did a talk yesterday about this sort of eternal conflict between a group of people who I view as, at least, if not genetically, we don't know for sure, at least in spirit, the descendants of Esau against the descendants of Jacob, and how that conflict, at least in Ezekiel chapter 35, and 36 which I believe is a future prophecy that I think in part is unfolding in front of us, that in the end times there will be this conflict between the Jews, the descendants of Jacob, and the descendants of Esau. And again, whether it's genetic or spiritual, it's clearly playing out, and it plays out in the mountains of Israel. So my talk focused a little bit on some of the places that we went when we were in Israel a couple months ago. Hebron and Ai and Bethel and Shiloh and Shechem, and those places which are now, called the, quote, West Bank, historical Judea and Samaria, and how this is, it says that there will be a people that will occupy the mountains of Israel, and they'll be very proud and haughty about that. Now, whether they're in complete control, that they would be, it's implied in the scripture there, it certainly is clear that they believe they have control of this area of Israel, and there's tremendous conflict. And this is the biblical heartland of Israel, the Judean hills, I think, where you're at right now. In fact, while we're doing that, if you could sort of show people where you're at, and tell us what we see when you turn your camera.
So this is the front view of my camera, and I'm actually in the hills of Judea, just south of Jerusalem. And you can see, this is one of the most beautiful places on my almost daily walk. You can see how the hills are terraced here. An archaeologist friend of mine has told me that the original terracing was done thousands of years ago, and they're not certain who originally did it. It could be Israelites, or it could be Canaanites that originally terraced it. What you see here is a watch cave, if you will, and then I don't know if you can see it up behind the tree over there, but that's a watch tower that's in disrepair. These watch
Maybe
towers,
if you could point your camera up just a little bit to get the watch tower.
It's kind of hidden there.
Okay.
Where I'm standing now, it's behind a tree in front of me.
Okay.
You can see a doorway just at the bottom of it, and then this right here, where I have moved since I talked to you before we began filming, this is a watch cave. These watchtowers, watch caves, were places to temporarily live, especially during the harvest season, and keep an eye not only on your crops, but interestingly enough, to keep an eye on your neighbor's crops across the valley. It's easier actually to see what's happening to your neighbor's farm than to your own. And so watchtowers protected people on the other side, and people within their watchtowers protected farms on this side. And what they would do is they would see if thieves were coming along to steal harvest, especially like olive oil or olives, and then they would either set up a smoke alarm or maybe sound a shofar, some sort of a trumpet, and alert the landowners on the other side that there was a thief in their fields. Well, these watchtowers, like I said, they're all around Judea and Samaria. You'll see there are thousands and thousands and thousands of them.
Well, and that was...
They are almost... Go ahead.
I was going to say, that was one of the things as we went up through Judea and Samaria that was sort of stunning to me was, especially up north of Jerusalem, up into the area of what was the northern kingdom of Israel after the kingdom split after the death of Solomon, was that every hillside, it seems like every hillside, every mountain from top to bottom is terraced for farming.
Yeah.
And I mean, this didn't happen overnight, and it certainly shows that there were lots of people there. And I know that in the Jewish settlements that are being sort of proliferating up in that area, up around Shiloh, there's a very large Jewish settlement. They're reinstituting the farming that took place up there, and you can always tell when it's a Jewish settlement because as you drive by, there's a vineyard, usually,
right.
And that's an indication.
Right.
And then the red tile roofs also, but they're very agriculturally oriented, which is sort of the historical aspect of the Israel people, the Israelites, Jewish people, whatever you want to call them. So we were talking about the Silk Road and things going on in the north, and there was this front page magazine article that I read this week about the Third Lebanon War, and we've already talked about that a little bit. So I'll have to edit this out. So we've talked a little bit about the Third Lebanon War that may be coming and the security situation up on the northern border, but there's also some things going on over in the area of Quneitra and Dara and the Golan, sort of to the east and north of the Golan Heights. And what's going on up there right now?
Well, the whole situation with a potential war with Hezbollah, which is a puppet of Iran, is part and parcel with what's going on in Syria. Just this last week, Russia moved troops within a few miles of Israel's northern border with Syria into the Syrian Golan, apparently there to make sure that rebels don't gain control. Israel is very, very concerned about this because they see Iranian troops establishing a foothold under Russia's protection. Russia has said, no, we're not going to let this happen. But what they're actually doing is they are letting it happen. They are letting Iranian troops stay very close to Israel's border in southern Syria. So Israel sees Iran moving right next door to Lebanon, where Hezbollah has 150,000 missiles aimed or in their arsenal for Israel. And they will be able to hit anywhere in Israel, unlike what happened in the war in 2014 with Hamas in Gaza. Those rockets were only able to hit regionally. Some were fired and were able to reach as far as Jerusalem, but only a couple. These rockets that Hezbollah has up in Lebanon will be able to reach any place in Israel. And one estimate I saw about a year ago is that Israel has estimated that when war begins, it's likely to begin with as many as 7,000 missiles a day being fired into Israel. And yes, Israel has dramatically improved its ability to intercept missiles, but it's doubtful they can get them all. And I think this is also recognized here because Israel has a plan now to evacuate people from the north. There and not just from the north. Like I said, these missiles can hit any place in Israel. They'll be aimed at Jerusalem. They'll be aimed at Tel Aviv. They'll be aimed at major population centers.
Yeah, I mean, it could affect the Ben Gurion Airport as well, the only international
Oh,
airport in
absolutely.
Israel.
That's a prime target. That's a prime target.
Well, and it's interesting too. There's a parallel, I think, to what Israel's response might be to this threat, that they will let it reach a certain level, and then they will do now just like what they did in 1967, where they viewed the buildup of the Arab armies around Israel as an existential threat to the Jewish state, and they launched attacks in June of 1967. I don't think they're going to sit back and just say, well, this will happen, and we'll let it go.
Well, they've already done a number of operations in Syria, attacking weapons depots where arms are being shipped by Iran into Syria and over into Lebanon. Iran now, for its part, about a week ago, a report came out, maybe 2 weeks ago, that Iran is building a missile manufacturing site in Lebanon. I don't know that Israel has the same option it did in 1967, because these were regional players. Now you've got Russia on its doorstep. You've got the U.S. right here. You've got China involved. I think there's a keen awareness that it would not take much. It would not take much to start a world war. Israel doesn't want.
Yeah, it does seem to be a very volatile situation, and it would take just one person making the wrong decision to have this burst into a giant conflagration that involves a lot of major players in the world.
Yeah, in fact, I think we're witnessing a miracle in that regard in these very days, because we're seeing the Islamists in the Palestinian Authority and in Hamas now, and in the last few years, they have done everything. They have struck spark after spark after spark after spark into this extremely volatile situation, and there hasn't been an explosion. There hasn't been a major regional or global conflagration. And I think that's rather miraculous.
Well, it also appears that Israel is doing a very deft job of sort of playing off people against each other.
Yes.
In the Temple Mount crisis, they appeared to come in and resolve the situation so that the King Abdullah in Jordan came out looking like he had some power and authority to do things, and so it was sort of a political situation. I know what they did at the Temple Mount with removing the security cameras and the metal detectors was not very popular in Israel. I mean, I've seen polls taken that 77% of Israelis did not support the government's decision there. But it does appear that there was a backstory to it, that Netanyahu was trying to keep Jordan stabilized as well, because the Jordan king, Abdullah, is not very strong, and he has probably now over half of his population is made up of either Palestinian refugees or their descendants, and then the refugees from Syria, where he has hundreds of thousands in the north part of Jordan. It's just taxing their infrastructure or something terribly over there. So I think Netanyahu reached a solution where the king of Jordan can maintain power, and because Israel doesn't want, I mean, it's bad enough having this destabilizing situation on its northern border. They don't want it on its eastern border all the way along the Jordan. That's a very important security barrier for Israel, the Jordan Valley.
And along those lines, are you aware Abdullah is coming here tomorrow?
I've heard that he is coming to Ramallah for, I don't know if he's ever been there before, but it's certainly an unusual visit.
It's been 5 years.
Okay. And at the same time, too, and we'll get back to so we see the Russian troops coming in up there. The reports I've read is that they're special ops troops.
They're mercenaries.
Mercenaries mercenaries from this what we I call the Stan republics, the Islamic republics that were part of the former Soviet Union. I also saw an article that along the southern border, along the Sinai border, that they're building a underground security barrier. I assume it's going to take a lot of money and a lot of time to build that to prevent tunneling from the Sinai because of the Islamist groups that are now present in the Sinai.
Yeah, Israel has already begun and had already committed to doing this underground wall around Gaza, but not at the southern border with Sinai, yes? And so it appears that what they're doing now is they're saying we're going to also do this underground barrier between Gaza and Sinai. I don't think it extends across the entire Sinai border at this point. The real tunneling threat is tunneling to and from Gaza into Egypt or Sinai.
Okay, so it's over there around Sderot and other places there along the border with Gaza.
Yes.
And I was actually talking to someone who was recently in Sderot, which is sort of like the front line in any missile rocket attacks that come from Gaza. And the people there have essentially, when the siren goes off, you have 8 seconds to take cover. It's not a lot of time. And if you take that experience and then transfer it up to the Lebanon border, and you have 7,000, the ability appears of Hezbollah to launch 7,000 rockets a day, or missiles and rockets, and the time that people have to take cover up there is a very short amount of time, and that's why they're talking about evacuating. I think it's hundreds of thousands of people from that area. We were up in Nahariya when we were there a couple, and that there's a 6-minute drive from the Lebanon border. Well, you put a missile or a rocket, and they only have literally seconds. And I guess the hope then is that the rocket doesn't hit you, because you don't really have time to take cover. So we have the Russians up there on the northern border. We have what's going on the southern border. We have everything going on Jordan and along the eastern border. And then we have the situation, let's talk just briefly here before we end about the Temple Mount situation. It seems to have calmed down quite a bit. But just give us your perspective of what's going on up there.
One of the most interesting things that continues to unfold from the Temple Mount crisis is the direct involvement of Tehran. Tehran reportedly funded the original terror cell that killed the Israeli policeman. They have been interacting with Hamas in Gaza. Hamas has sent a Temple Mount report to Tehran. Tehran, for its part, from Khamenei, the so-called supreme leader of Iran, and Rouhani, the president, and others, they are all camping on this situation that happened now, and it's in the past a week or two. Still, they're camping on it. They're doing everything they can to stoke the passion of Islamists in and around Israel. So this situation has calmed down, but it has not gone away.
And so it's one of these things where any little spark could set it off again.
Yes, and in fact, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, this is one situation right now where we see almost everybody attempting to spark an explosion. This is the Islamist intent. It's the Palestinian Authority's intent. It is Hamas's intent. It is Khamenei's intent, the supreme leader in Iran. All of these people are shouting about Al-Aqsa Mosque and how it's being desecrated. And every single day I follow on Twitter an Al-Quds an account and also a Waqf account. And they are relentless in their tweets about any Israelis who come up onto the Temple Mount. They say Israelis are storming the Temple Mount. Well, there are always families with children and old rabbis, but they always characterize it as storming the Temple Mount. and they are punching this over and over and over again. They are lighting or attempting to ignite an explosion. And
there were about
succeed.
weren't there about 1,000 Jews that I believe they did a walk around the old city and maybe went up on the Temple Mount the other day?
Yes, this last week was the saddest day on the Jewish calendar, and every year it's called the Tisha B'Av. It is the day on the Hebrew calendar when a number of tragedies occurred to Israel. The exile to Babylon occurred reportedly on this day. The temple was destroyed on this day. A number of other immense tragedies have taken place. So Israel always shuts down on Tisha B'Av. It's not like a Shabbat, but they do fast on this day. And so on this day of grieving, there were a number of Israelis who felt it incumbent to go up on the Temple Mount legally and walk around. It's part of their mourning for the loss of the temple back in the year 70 of the Common Era. So this then became an excuse for the Islamists to say, "Oh, look at all these Jews coming up. They want to knock down Al-Aqsa. They want to knock down the Golden Dome Mosque. They want to put up their temple, and that's what they're here to do. And look, that's why they're up on the Mount today." Every time a Jew appears on the Temple Mount, it's characterized as Jews attempting to take over the Temple Mount and destroy the Islamic presence there.
Right. Well, is there anything that you could tell us that we should be sort of on the watch out for that you think are coming up in the next, weeks or months? I know you're not a prophet. But I mean, do you think we're going to see more of the same, and maybe it bursts into something bigger?
It is so volatile, John. I hesitate to even try to pontificate. Anything could happen. All of the whole situation, as you talk about in your update every week, is so volatile. So it's moving so quickly that we could see everything from the eruption of a war to a peace treaty with Israel. We don't know. We could see the Pope try to establish some sort of a religious United Nations thing. So many things are in play right now. It's hard to predict. I think we need to keep a close eye on things, and that close eye needs to include what Pope Francis is doing.
Certainly. Well, look, Brian, thanks so much for talking with us today. Again, Brian has his website ministry is JerusalemJournal.net, and I think you can get the Heim Report headlines every day if you want to go directly at JerusalemJournal.net/headlines. And you can also sign up and get the Heim Report 6 days a week. You can also check out his Facebook page and keep track of, you do a great job of keeping the headlines, sort of the relevant ones, succinct. And I know some days you have a lot of things to post just because of everything that's going on. I mean, we could just go down through the list of the headlines from this morning and talk for a few hours. So, but I do appreciate you taking the time, and God bless you, and you'll be in our prayers, and we do appreciate you continuing to keep us informed.
Thank you, John. God bless.
Thank you. God bless.